Hey everybody, great to be back here in the fish tank. Now today we're going to go through the latest patch notes for Minion Masters. This is going to be version 2.17, and I know it's a little bit late. The patch has been out for a few days, so apologies about that, but I still think it's important to go through it. As always, there'll be a link in the description to the blog post that has all of these changes on them. Right, so 2.17, Cleansed by Fire. So this must mean that the Battle Pass is Empyrean related. So let's start with the buffs, things that are getting stronger. So, our good friend, the Battle Shihao. So remember, the way that he works is that he gets an attack bonus, an attack speed bonus, based on the enemies and the number of enemies that are close to him. And close to him is now a little bit further, up from 5 to 6. So his attack speed can be insane if he's got a bunch of enemies near him. Now, Harbinger, the range has been increased from 12 to 14, so it will engage further away and be just kind of, you have to wait a little bit longer for it to get close, and it's not going to get as close as before. Right, Jade Spark Watchers. These are where you get the 2 monkeys plus the 2 little monkeys. Now has Growth Burst Shroom 2. Up from Growth Burst Shroom 1. So those are the shrooms on the ground that can be picked up by Zenshi minions that give them a buff. Right, here's one for King Puff. His alternate perk 2, Mimic Magic, can now copy buffs. That should really say minions can now copy buffs even if they have buffs on them. So the way this worked previously is if you had an unbuffed minion, so that means a minion that doesn't have any buffs like Rage, Spirit, Growth, anything like that, and they attacked an enemy minion that did have an appropriate buff on them, they would copy it. Not steal it, copy it. And because it was unbuffed, that meant they could only do that once, because once they've got a buff, they are therefore buffed, no longer unbuffed, therefore they don't count. But that's changed now. So any minion can copy buffs, even if they have buffs on them. So what that means is your buffed minions can copy a buff if they don't have it. And once they've done that, they can copy more buffs, assuming that their target has multiple buffs on them. So if you attack something that's got Spirit, Rage, Giant Growth, multiple things on it, there will be a cooldown, but that minion, your minion attacking those, will grab, copy a random one. So you might do your first attack, you grab Spirit, second attack, Rage, so on and so forth. So in theory, this will definitely be a lot stronger. I've used a lot of King Puff, but never really used Mimic Magic. And it's one of those that you do need to use reactively based on the match, because you need to make a fairly quick decision, because remember, you can change your alternate perks, but only up until the time they're unlocked. So this is a perk 2, so you do have a little bit of a while to do it. But you need to pay attention to what you're playing against. Does your opponent have a lot of buffs that you can copy? If not, then you're going to be much better off sticking to the basic one. So that's kind of an interesting one. Could be good, but it's going to be based a little bit on what your opponent's playing. Right, Net Blaster, attack rate has been buffed. So remember, attack rate is how quickly it attacks. So a lower number is better. So it attacks every 4.5 seconds instead of 5 seconds. Net Blaster is one of those cards, because it has AoE CC. Just trying to think of the numbers there. It does a big area of crowd control. It does need to be handled cautiously, because if it gets too strong, it's going to be insane. Right, Prime Sergeant Radic now has Mythic. Now, I'm not entirely sure why this was, but it might have been more of a bug fix, because there's a thing where if you revive with a Mordor Tombstone, something like Radic that has an ability card, that ability card basically gets bricked. And it not only does it not work, so I've seen some weird things where somebody had Radic and they revived the Radic, and then they tried to jump the revived Radic with his ability, and Fanriel was on the field, and Fanriel was jumping instead. It was crazy. Now that bug might even still exist, I don't know, but That doesn't happen anymore. He now has Mythic, which means he won't get revived, he won't get destroyed with the destroy effects like a normal minion, and he can't be moved around again like non-mythic minions. Ravager, damage reduced from 10 to 8, but the attack rate has gone up, stroke down. It attacks every 0.2 seconds instead of every 0.3 seconds. So DPS has gone up a little bit, I think. Doesn't really change any sort of breakpoint. Still takes a couple of hits to kill a Scrat. That doesn't change, but a little bit of a buff there for Ravager. Resonating Construct. So mana freeze reduced from 3 to 2. So remember the way mana freeze works is it basically you can use your mana before you have it, and then the next X amount of manas are frozen. So mana freeze, it just basically costs 1 less mana. Scrat Horde, so you get 10 of them instead of 8. Now this one's a little bit bugged at the moment. So the idea, so there was supposed to be a range increase from 6 to 8 to the Siege Breaker Mark 1, which is the little 6 mana tank. But there was a bit of a confusion between the community and the devs, and they applied this change to Siege Imperator Ruby instead of the Siegebreaker Mark 1. And the way Ruby works is kind of different because she has a range, which has now gone up to 8, but her guns on the side, they have their own independent range, which hasn't increased. So you might notice that she gets to the tower with her 8 range, but the 6 range guns, or whatever they are, don't actually attack the tower. So that's bugged. I don't know if it's bad enough for us to see a bug fix, a hot fix, but we'll see. Ting Tang Tongue. So previously, if you lost a third of your health, you would lose one of the monkeys. And remember, losing the monkeys, you lose that monkey DPS. Those breakpoints have been changed. So some monkeys apparently are worth more than others, but so you won't lose the first monkey and its DPS until you lose 50% of the health and 75% of the health to lose the second one. So, you know, it's going to be stronger. Xiaolong now has Growth Burst Shroom. So as we mentioned before with the J-Spark Watchers, Growth Burst Shroom is where it drops the mushrooms. Remember, the mushroom is dropped on draw. So that's when the card enters your hand. So Xiaolong, if you don't have any other Zenshis in your deck, you can just buff Xiaolong. Or if you have other Zenshis or some Growth Burst Shroom strat, then you can definitely utilize that. Right, rebalances, things that are not being changed in just one simple way, or they may or may not be better depending on the circumstances. So the Protocol Assassin, her damage has been reduced from 60 to 40. The Arc Slash cooldown, which is where she does that AoE dash, is now every 4 seconds instead of every 8 seconds. And the damage of that slash is 80 instead of 150. So the idea is she doesn't sort of one-shot quite so many things as she does before. And generally when dealing with her, you wait until she does her slash and then you try to kill her between those slashes. But that's going to be more difficult to do now it's every 4 seconds. Now the Priestess, movement speed increased from 2 to 4. And I know, depending on the situation, this might be better or it might be worse. When she was super slow, you could spawn her in the pocket and then it gave you quite a lot of time to build up the mana, to build up the push. You can't quite do that so much more. But a speed of 4 means that she's going to keep up with a lot more units, or keep at least close to a lot more units than she did before. Because previously, if you spawned her on something, then generally that unit would walk further away from her because she was so slow. So Priestess changed there. Right, nerfs. So we've seen a lot of wildcards being removed recently, and that's going to continue here. So Arcane Ring, one of the, I think if you checked out my meta video from last season, I think Arcane Ring was quite heavily wildcarded, probably in the top 2 or 3. Wildcards reduced from 2 to 1. Blade Star, I'm not entirely sure where Blade Star is in the meta at the moment. Its play rate did drop a lot. It'd be nice to see the stats for this current season when they come out, because it did get nerfed. It does do less damage. Wildcards reduced from 3 to 1 for the Blade Star. Blind Date, this was again one of the most wildcarded cards. Wildcards reduced from 3 to 1. let's just remove wildcards entirely, right? Hot take. Chain Lightning, master damage reduced from 100 to 50. Chain Lightning has always been a very strong spell, even though currently it's very different to how it used to be. Remember, Chain Lightning used to have infinite number of bounces, which we definitely don't see anymore. But I think it might have been a little bit more expensive then. But anyway, if you're using Chain Lightning, be aware, master damage down from 100 to 50. Crystal Construct, wild cards reduced from 3 to 1. Daggerfall, again, master damage reduced from 50 to 25. So this is kind of a little slap on the wrist for these very heavily performing spells. Okay, the Mana Surge buff, which is the one that the Crystal Elf units, or most of the Crystal Elf units get. And this is where you get the speed, attack speed bonus, kind of like almost sort of specific haste. When you've got 6+ mana, that's been reduced from 33% to 25%. So that's kind of an overall nerf to a lot of those cards, and specifically the Mana Surge deck, where you have a lot of these Crystal Elf cards. So it'd be interesting to see, based on this change, how those cards are performing. Shroomer was very, very overplayed last season. Damage reduced from 50 to 40. And remember, ideally you're playing the Shroomer to get to the other side of the bridge to split, to get 2 of them. So although it's a small nerf, it's kind of a double nerf in a lot of occasions. Spire Stag, again, a very strong card. Damage reduced from 35 to 30. And Warrior, wildcards reduced from 3. I nearly said 30 then, that'd be crazy, to 1. And we've had a couple of bug fixes as well. Tooltip for Tronvir's Windstone now displays the correct damage value, and Azog's ability now has a range indicator. But I think this might be bugged, and I don't know what it's like. It shows where it can't jump to instead of where it can jump to. Something's reversed. Anyway, right. So those are the those are the balance changes for 2.17. Let me know in the comments, as always, what do you think of the changes? Do you like them? I think the game is in a pretty well balanced state. Remember, the game is balanced by the community. So if you want to get involved in that, go to the Discord, find the right section, have your suggestions, or discuss other people's suggestions. And let's keep the balance going. It's the stuff that you think's too strong already based on what you've seen this season. If you're enjoying the content here, make sure you hit that subscribe button to stay up to date with all things Minion Masters. If you've enjoyed this video, a thumbs up is always appreciated, and I will see you again soon here in the fish tank. And if you're not awkward waving back to me, I'm going to be very disappointed.